I'm John Seaman. I'm at Road America, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. This is the weekend of September 9th to 11th, 2011. This is the 26th annual Vintage Sports Car Drivers Association Elkhart Lake Vintage Festival. This is an annual gathering of vintage and historic race cars at the 4-mile Road America track. The event features Group 11 Can-Am, which is celebrating the 45th anniversary of this outstanding series. The 40th anniversary of Trans Am will feature Group 6 historic production GTO big bore Mustangs and Camaros, with a special challenge race for smaller 2.5-liter Trans Am cars such as Alphas, Volvos, and Datsuns. The special guest for this event will be John Morton. John drove a factory Datsun team in the Trans Am. Backed by popular demand will be the combined field races with roots in the early 50s, with the Kimberly Cup for pre-war vintage production and sports racing cars, and the Sheldon Cup for vintage production, sports racing, and historic production cars. I'm with John Morton, and he's the Grand Marshal for the WSCS Elkhart Lake Vintage Festival.
Started with a Lotus 7 and then drove Cobras a little bit, and when I was the second year of racing, and then bought a Lotus 23.
You have some history, John, with the BRE Datsuns. Can you tell us about that program?
I started driving for Peter Brock in 1969 with the Datsun Roadsters, and that we did well with those cars. It evolved into the Z car, which we won 2 national championships with, 1970 and 71. And the next step, we wanted to do professional racing, and the SCCA was going to have the 2.5 challenge, which was going to go in concert with the big Can-Am cars. Prepared a 510. At the beginning, I thought, how can this little car compete with the Alphas and the BMWs? As it turns out, it competed very well with them. We won the first year, which was 71, won the championship, and then in 72, we pretty much dominated.
What was the key to their success? Was it lightweight? Was it preparation, or a little of everything, or the driver?
Well, we had a lot of... the second year, we had several drivers. We had Bobby Allison, Peter Gregg, Mike Down drove with me the first season, Sam Posey, Jim Fitzgerald, Bob Sharp. We had a lot of good drivers.
Yes.
So I wouldn't put it to the drivers. I think the team, the preparation, car had tremendous potential, but the team was so good, I think we could have won the championship with an Alpha or a BMW.
I'm with Carl Bullock, and this is a McLaren. Can you tell us the year and the make?
The year is a 1970. It's a M8E, and it is updated with a D body, which was done quite a bit back in the series. This car has been rebuilt from an original part of an original tub that Lothar Moschenbacher drove back in the series, and he had crashed the car, and the tub was discarded. I came along about 13 years ago, and we rebuilt the tub with John Collins, who was one of his actual mechanics at the time. As it is, it does not have any Can-Am race history.
I know you run here at Road America with it quite a bit. How do you like this track compared to some of the other tracks you run on?
Oh, this is by far is the most fun track for this car. You know, every time they have one of these reunions, you see another car or something you haven't seen for a while, and it's just really awesome to see all of these old cars the way that they ran back in the series, and to be able to run with them at, at the same time.
I'm with Robert Ryan. Can you tell us about this Can-Am car?
This is a McLaren. It's 1968 M6B, which is a customer car. It was campaigned during the late 60s, mostly on the East Coast, by privateer. I acquired the car in 1997 from a gentleman in Canada that had it in Alberta. I kind of bought it sight unseen. It's a small block. In those days, these cars transitioned from small block into big block. I've always had a small block in this. It's a 400 Chevy, and with fuel injection, and it gets we're putting out something over 600 horsepower.
Now, after you acquired the car, what kind of condition was it in?
When I bought it, we were walking through snow to the barn where the car was kept, and we rolled it out in the snow, and the transmission was apart. He was kind of showing me how the gears go together, and what he could remember, and it didn't make any sense to me anyway. But I'm from the West Coast, California, and our tracks there are basically shorter. I've been to Watkins Glen, Montreal, Mount Tremblant. Coronado does a nice event down on the North Island Naval Base, and we'll be heading there from here. So we've also been to New Zealand with a group of McLarens and other Can-Am cars back in 2008 as a visit and tribute to Bruce McLaren.
I'm with Steve Bonk, and this is the 2.5 liter Trans Am class. Can you tell us about your car and some of the other cars in the group?
I put together a Trans Am group in the Midwest. The website is www.transam-bsedan.com, but the reason really behind doing it all was to show everybody these great old cars. This car here is a Datsun 510. That is a tribute car to BRE, which was the championship winner. John Morton is here today. He was the championship winner in 1971 and 72. The Alfa Romeo was the biggest contender with them. They're out here also. It was for all small, under 2.5 liter sedan vehicles. It was a Pro Series. After that, it continued on as B sedan to 1979 in amateur classes.
For the Datsuns, then, being a sedan, you'd think that they would be boxy, not very aerodynamic. So what makes them so fast?
Well, what it was is Pete Brock and the BRE team, and of course John Morton, they made it really fast because it is boxy, but a lot of the tracks they ran on were not like Road America as far as a long straights, but it really was like a handling track, and they made the car handle. It has an independent rear suspension, and they got phenomenal horsepower out of this small little motor. This car back in 1971 had a 1600, so it's a small motor. That one was about 185 horse, maybe 190. In 72, though, they were allowed to go in 1800, and guesstimates are right around 200, 210 horsepower.
I'm with Bob Rowley, and he has a Lola. Can you tell us the year?
This is a 1967 Lola T70 3B Spider, one of 4. And this was actually Dan Gurney's 1967 Can-Am entry. Surtees had a car, Penske had one, and I'm not sure who had the 4th car, but there were only 4 of the 3B chassis made.
Can you summarize some of the history from back then?
Well, Gurney does not like to talk about the 67 Can-Am season. He had the 302 engine in it with the Gurney Westlake heads, and it was just underpowered compared to McLaren and even the Chevy powered Lola. He was first, second, and most of the time third on the grid behind Denny and Bruce, and but did not finish one single race in '67. So
after the series, what happened to the car?
Actually, we think Swede Savage maybe drove it a couple of races in '68. In the mid-'70s, this car was converted to a Lola Coupe, like many of the Can-Am cars. And actually, I ran it as a coupe from '98 to I guess it was 2009 when we started the restoration to take it back to the original. Road America is by far my favorite racetrack. This is the perfect track for a Can-Am car. 3 very, very fast straightaways. And the kink is scary as can be. Yeah, I don't go flat out through the kink. I lift.
Do you have to change the gearing at all compared to short track?
Oh, yeah. We have Road America gears, and then we've got everything else.
Where are you from, Bob?
I'm from Eagle, Colorado, which is Vail Valley.
Well, I'm glad you brought your car, and it's nice to see you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Love this event.
I'm with Ed Swart.
This is a Lola T163 from 1968, and it's a big block Can-Am car. This car belongs to Lilo Zikron from Toluca Lake Historic. We know some of the history. It had raced by club racer in the past in the Can-Am series. We found the records of it, so, but not by a famous racer. I've run many times here, yeah, in Formula 5000 and Formula 1 and Formula Atlantic, Formula 2s, and also in Chevron Sports Racers.
How does Road America compare with some other tracks?
I find I've raced a lot in Europe. Actually, I've raced on 84 different racetracks, and I've raced since 1961. I find in the United States Road America the best track. In Europe it was the Nürburgring, the old Nürburgring, which was the fantastic track, and now it is Spa, basically, Spa-Francorchamps. But here in America I find this the best track.
When you started racing back in the early 60s, what were you driving?
I was actually driving Fiat Abarths because my father had a Fiat agency, so we were driving Fiat Abarths, and from 1965 through 1970 I was driving for the factory, for the Abarth factory, and I won 2 European touring car championships, and then I started racing sports cars. 2 years with Abarth, and I won the 1970 European FIA sports car title. And Bonnier won the prototype and I won the sports car. And then 71 I moved to Chevrons because Abarth stopped making cars. Yeah, I have a Chevron B19. I bought it new in 71 and raced it for Canon Racing Team, and then sold it and stopped racing for 4 years. And then when historic racing started in 74, 75, I started racing historic cars. Ferrari short wheelbase and various other cars, and this is my 520th race.
It's been enjoyable, and I've learned a lot about your racing history. Thank you, Ed.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the interview.
I'm with Butch Gilbert, and this I've just finished the 2.5-liter Trans Am race on Saturday. Now, Butch, this is a Triumph Vitesse. Can you tell us the year and a little more information about the car?
It's a 1969, and it was raced in the Trans Am Series from 1971 for the factory. It was built by Kaz Kasner. They gave him $75,000 to build a car. That was it. And so they ran 4 races in 71, and then it was sold to a private person, and he raced it in B sedan for the next until 1988. And so it's actually raced every year since 1971.
That's got to be one of the few Triumphs Vitesse running, and one of the very few that have made it that many years.
Yeah, probably so. It's definitely the only one that ran Trans Am for the factory.
How did it place in the Trans Am? Midfield, or do you know what the history there is?
It qualified well a couple times. I think it qualified 4th here at Elkhart Lake in 1971, but they had some tire problems. They were burning off the rear tires, and they'd have to come in and pit and then go back out, and so they never finished well. I think they DNF'd in 3 out of the 4 because they just didn't have the money and the resources to take and develop the car.
How did you acquire the car?
I happened to see it on eBay, and I had there was another Triumph Vitesse racing on the West Coast in B sedan, and I always liked it. It was always a fun car to watch run.
What have you had to do to maintain it?
Everything was wore out from the radiator cap back. The paint was pretty good, but everything else was flat wore out. And I put a 2-liter motor back in it, and it had a 2.5-liter in it when I bought it, and and slowly been getting it back to Trans Am form from 1971.
Where do you go next?
I'm going to go home and relax. We were at Lime Rock last week, and we were at Laguna Seca 2 weeks before that.
Well, thank you very much, Butch.
Thanks a lot, John.
There you go.
We're going to go through the Vintage Spirit Awards for our drivers. Starting out in Group 1, car number 12 is Richard Morrison. John Morton is our guest. Car number 1, Andrew Cannon.
Maserati.
Maserati 200. Stunning car. Group 4, someone we all know and love, that is a very diehard VSCDA driver. Car number 44, Matt Premat. Group 5, car number 30 is Thor Johnson. Car number 76 is Henry Vicioso.
The other one.
Wow, he's got a groupie thing going on.
Okay.
Group number 7, car number 66 is Jim Gustafson, a DB4 Swift. Is Steve Grundle, car number 161. Group 9, which is car number 28, Richard Duffy. Group 10, car number 40 is Ricky Del Rosario. Those Group 10 guys party a lot together. 11, which is our Can-Am, our feature for the weekend, is car number 47, Kenny Bristol. The final is our winning car for this evening, which was to raise money for Camp Anakiji, which is our new charity starting this year. We're very happy to have them here, and we hope to be able to do a lot of other good things for them. And the car is a 1965 Corvette Coupe Larry Tomter. Different kind of a...
I'm with John Connell and Joe Sacco. This is a Datsun that raced in SCCA for many years.
This car was originally built by Joe Sacco. Joe's sitting right next to me. It then ran, he sold it to Ed Tillotson, and Ed Tillotson ran it for a number of years, going to the runoffs with it, and then I purchased it. It's been in the family for a long time.
Brand new 1971 Datsun. Bought it from a dealer in Buffalo where my brother worked, and we drove it back to Chicago and tore it all apart.
Okay.
And then, you know, we raced it in mostly in regionals in '71. And as it turned out, Datsun had this great competition department, so they gave me a lot of stuff. This car cost $1,750. So it was quite nice. And then, you know, you could go to the competition. Well, Peter Brock was just in business then, and we bought a lot of stuff from him, and, you know, you just bolt on and go racing. Ed Tillotson, John's brother-in-law, he and I went to driver's school together. You know, that's how we met, and that was like in '69. I only had this car for 2 years because I had it that one regional year and then one national year where I was in the runoffs in '72, and then I had the opportunity to buy a BRE car for a real bargain. So, and I raced that car for 4 or 5 years, and then after that I had a Bob Sharp's 610. So I had that until '82, and we were in the runoffs every year in the '70s and up until '82.
When my brother-in-law Ed Tillotson passed away, I bought it from my sister-in-law and started racing it in 2005. And I've been racing it in the Midwestern Council and also at some of the vintage races. I'm running an 1800 engine with a close ratio gearbox. We've done a lot of work to the motor. And then it's running a 610 front end and pretty big brakes. I did a little better this morning. I turned to 49 or 249. Yesterday I turned to 251, so it's moving right along.
Which is a most unusual car to find. This is the car that won Chapter 2.
I'm with Andy Boone, and he has a 1968 McLegal. Can you tell us some of the history of the car?
Yeah, this car was purchased by Dan Gurney's AAR shop in 1968 and raced as a standard McLaren M6B. No real modifications. He wanted to purchase a factory car, a team car from McLaren, but McLaren wouldn't sell it to him. So then over the winter of '68, they decided to make some Gurney modifications. So they made complete new bodywork except for the doors, much different than an M6B standard bodywork. They went to titanium suspension components, titanium exhaust, titanium shift rod, everything to lighten the car as much as they could. They ended up taking about 100 pounds off a standard unit. They raced with various engines in '68 and '69. In '68 it was mostly Fords. Gurney was big on the small block Fords, anywhere from 325 to 377 cubic inches. And at that time everybody was transitioning to big blocks, so he was basically upset that Ford never got the 429 to him. They ended up giving it to Andretti. So he bought a 427 Chevy aluminum motor from Roger Penske and put it in the McLegal, and they added a high wing, which you see here, and we raced it, and every time it raced and it looked different. I mean, they had a front wing on it, they had these, what we have now, the fences. Yeah, and that's kind of how Gurney was. And it was pretty successful. I think his highest finish was 4th, and they only raced 4 times in '69, but it was always competitive, but just not quite fast enough to beat the factory McLarens. He would run up as much as second sometimes, but couldn't quite get the finishes he wanted. But it's a very good car. I like it because it's very different than the rest of the McLarens. You know, they made 28 M6Bs, but they only made 1 McLegal. So that's kind of fun.
Now, how did you find out about the car? You been looking for it, or it just happened to come up?
Well, not really. I literally saw it in a magazine in an ad. And it was funny, the guy that had the car, it had been out of circulation for over 30 years. The guy bought it from a ex-SEC amateur racer and he was an ex-Shelby engineer, and he had intended on restoring it himself. He finally realized he wasn't going to get around to it, so he had to restore professionally, and they made it into a very nice-looking concourse car. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great race car, so we had to do some things suspension-wise and stuff to bring it kind of up to snuff a little bit more. And since we've done that, it's been very competitive, and it's a lot of fun to drive, but it's a lot of work. And this is my favorite track. It's my favorite track overall. I've raced here since I was 21 because I used to live in the Chicago area. So I really enjoy it, and it's a good track for Can-Am cars because it's one of the few you can actually look at the gauges during a lap, and you kind of let the car have its head. So it's fun.
I'm with Tom Simpson, and he has a McKee. Can you tell us a bit about the car?
Love to. My car is a 1966 car that was built initially to either run in the USRRC or the Can-Am series, and it was driven in those days by Mac Crone in 1966. Mac ran the car in nationals, USRC events around the country, and then he entered Can-Am events in the fall because that was the first year for the Can-Am.
What does the car have for a drivetrain?
It has Chevrolet power. Originally it had a 366 Traco Chevrolet engine in it in 1966. Now I've got a 350 Chevrolet engine in it. Hewlin gearbox, and the car is a fairly simple car to maintain because one of the keys to Bob's success was he used off-the-shelf parts. Front spindles are from an American Motors Rambler. Brakes on all 4 corners are from a 65-66 Mustang, so those parts are still readily available. Rear axles are from a Corvette Stingray. Lot of stuff that normally would be pretty exotic that someone would have to make. He just went out and bought pieces off shelf and made them work. I like to run at Road America as much as I can. I run here at least twice a year. I run tracks where I can really use the car, let it out, use the horsepower. So I like to run at Watkins Glen, and I run there periodically. Road Atlanta is pretty good. Road America is what I consider my home track, and I've been racing here since 1968.
You tell me the history how you got the car?
Well, I got the car in 1985. I found the car, called Bob McKee, told him what I was looking at, asked me if he would take a look at the car and see if he would be interested in restoring it. It was a street car at the time, had a windshield on it, had windshield wipers, had a horn, had carpeting, a radio. It was a terrible mess, mufflers, but Bob stripped the whole thing down. We repaired the frame where it had some bent tubes and started from scratch and rebuilt the car as a new car in 1986, and I brought it out for the 20th reunion of the Can-Am.
Here in 1963, Augie had already driven one spin, 250 to change brakes and get
Please come up and share the podium. If Sharp here. Congratulations, Andy. How was it out there?
Well, it's the longest pit lap I've driven in a long time. It's fun.
Well, congratulations. You are the overall winner of the 45th anniversary of the Can-Am. Thank you for your team's effort, and I look forward to seeing you at the 50th. You had an incredible run, a third place overall finish. Congratulations. Well deserved. Congratulations on your second place finish and 2 frames with in the 45th anniversary of the historic Can-Am. You've been a great supporter. Your wife, your team, Bob McKee, you're all here, and it's a wonderful celebration to have you all together. Thank you.
Microscene and car number 36, the Red Alpha, and our lovely ladies from Pitt, and of course everybody knows John. And John's going to present the winner, our Kimberly Cup. It's our Sheldon Cup winner, Bob Youngo and silver number 8. It's our Sheldon, our mid-range group, and obviously they're all named after the original Cup races. Congratulations, Bob. John, I'm going to let you get out of the way and let you do that. I'm going to get a picture taken of me. Elkhart Lake Cup winner in our Big Bad Fast Boys class. It's Big Bad number 11 in the Roush Mustang. I'm going to once get off the podium. John, all right. Thank you very much. What we did this year for the first time was do a 3-race series, which is because VSCD now sanctions all 3 of the Road America events. All the vintage racing in Road America is sponsored by VSCDA. We decided to do a Group 6 challenge. This is obviously a great track for these cars, a lot of horsepower, a lot of lengths. And so it was based on partly on participation, partly on how you placed in a top 5 finish, and also you got spanked for metal contact, you were done. Off-course 4-wheel, you were penalized because we want this to be safe first, then fun. And the winner of that, because of today, is Brian Kennedy. Come on up, Brian. Thank you very much.